about it. Check it out. And now I'm happy to introduce on stage Tao Perry, who's going to be talking about labeling data.
Do I need this for the streaming? Yeah. Damn. All right. Hi, I'm Tal. I'm the founder of LightTag, and I'm going to tell you why you need to label data or you die. Now, the title might sound a bit dramatic, but essentially this is a sales pitch, and they told me to make a sense of urgency in sales. What's more urgent than a sense of death? So aside from being the founder of LightTag, what you need to know about me is that I built this tree. It's 4 meters tall out of plastic bottles full of LED lights. I did it with a friend. We put it in the desert, attracted hippies for a while. It's really cool. And the rest doesn't matter. It was an Israeli mid-burn, yes. Yes. Oh yeah, mid-burn is Israeli. You should know that. All right, so basically, like, I'll go into more what LightTag does later, but like essentially it's this. Right, so this is an example of a customer of ours who was trying to do tokenization in Tibetan. In Tibetan, they don't have a clear sense of what a word is. But like, we're a labeling tool, and you label, and it learns from you, and it gives you suggestions, and it does a bunch of other cool stuff. We'll get back to that later. But really, you need to ask yourself, you know, why did you spend the last almost 2 years building this stuff? And that's what we'll talk about today, right? So kind of in 3 parts. So the first part I want to talk about is like the deep learning revolution, what deep learning has done for data scientists, how it's kind of changed their jobs, and like, you know, what the meaning of being a data scientist or a machine learning practitioner is, and then how it's changed business, right? Because the people who paid data scientists to like sit around and pretend they're smart are business people, and they have a reason. Like, it's changed their reasonings and motivations. And once we cover all of that, and like why we built that thing might make more sense, I hope. But before that, let me tell you the punchline, right? Winners label data, okay? And people who don't. And you should be a winner. And I hate this clicker. Label data with LightTag. It has latency, fuck this. All right. So, read this comic real quick. So this was written by Randall Monroe, who is really smart, right? It's from XKCD. Randall Monroe is really smart. He's very heavy in computer science. And he kind of knows what he's talking about. And the reason I bring this up, right, the manager guy says to the developer, you know, tell me if the app is in a national park, if the photo is in a national park, which is not a problem because our phones record the coordinates. But then when he says, like, give me a bird, tell me if it's a bird, she says it's really hard, 5 years. And Monroe uses the word impossible, right? And that's kind of weird. Because if you found, this was in 2013 when Randall Monroe thought that like figuring out if a photo has a bird or not, he thought it was impossible. And in 2016 now, we got to the point where like we can upload a photo to a machine learning, and it's going to give us this output, 2 birds sitting on top of a tree branch. So like the machine learning can recognize a bird, it can recognize multiple birds, it can count. Wrong, though, because there are 3 birds in the photo. It can recognize a branch. It can recognize the concept of one thing sitting on another. And then it can take all of those ideas and it can output them in a sentence, right? So, like, something really fundamental, almost shocking changed between 2013 and 2016. And that thing is deep learning, right? Like, the only difference is the deep learning. And so we should talk about what that means for like us as practitioners, like people who are actually working with data or struggling with it or whatnot, right? So say I want to build a classifier to detect currywursts, right? But not the blutwurst, because those are gross. How would I go about doing that, right? If I get the input as a picture, like I'm kind of baffled because how do I get this into a system? Like, how do I reason about it? So before deep learning, usually the first step you would do is you would take this box of numbers, start with the picture. That means convolving, right? And then you would take this box of numbers over here, and you would also start with the picture. And then if you did that, then you would also do this, which is taking the norm of the 2 boxes starred with the picture, and you would get this, right? So this whole procedure is called a Sobel operator. And before kind of deep learning, this is one of the first steps we used to do with handling images, right? So it's, more generally, it's feature engineering. You get a bunch of data. How do you figure out, like, what is the reasonable interpretation to put it into your machine learning system so that it can say something intelligent about it? And the thing is that, like, even if I got this outlined, which is a simpler, maybe more convenient representation, it's about as useful as a Jackson Pollock painting, right? Like, I still don't really know what to do with that. And traditionally, this is why image recognition, natural language processing have been very hard, still are in some cases. And this was the majority of the work that data scientists did. Here's a bunch of data, now figure out the right features, right? Engineer the correct features for the algorithm to be able to say something intelligent about it. What's kind of changed with deep learning is that we have this different process now. Instead, we can come in and we put a picture at the bottom and we say that's a chair, or a car, or a sausage, right? We give it input data and we give it a label. And the deep learning, it figures out the features in kind of a deep layer-wise fashion by itself, right? Based on those inputs. The more data we give it, the better those predictions are. And then, like, we can start with a currywurst, and we can end up with a nice classifier that tells us hot dog, not hot dog, right? Without doing any feature engineering. And so the corollary of that is that winners label data. Anyone recognize this fine woman? No one? It's Fei-Fei Li. She made ImageNet, which was like the first really large set of labeled images that, like, all the first major deep learning benchmarks were benchmarked against, and kind of gave us a sense of, oh my god, this stuff actually works. Hang on. Help? Okay. Right. So the next thing I want to talk about is this lovely picture, right? So this is a rice terrace. It's beautiful. It's really nice. Like, it's almost inspiring. However, rice is a commodity. Okay? And the other thing that's a commodity is deep learning. Okay? So let me explain. Anyone recognize this lovely set of equations? Excellent. You're normal people. So these are these define the LSTM, the long short-term memory unit, which is kind of the workhorse of natural language processing deep learning, right? If you take these, whatever, like, you end up getting a thing that can handle very long text and still, like, do intelligent things with long-term dependencies. And traditionally, like, to do deep learning on text, then you needed to, understand these equations, like, the level that, like, you know what these mean, and then to be able to take the gradients of them, and then you needed to be able to implement that in code, right, so that a machine would actually do that. So you need to be, like, a decent theoretician and mathematician and a good programmer. And if you want to do that at scale, you need to be a really good programmer, because you need to be efficient. And the thing is that, like, that's not true anymore. Like, that's a commodity, because now you can just do these 2 lines of code, and that's completely equivalent, right? So, like, literally import TensorFlow, you have to install it, right? So there's another line of pip install TensorFlow, right? So 3 lines, I'm cheating, but you get the idea, right? Like, that you don't need these equations anymore, and you don't need to implement this stuff, because really that's what it boils down to. And then you need to ask yourself, if you're a practitioner, like, what's my advantage? What am I bringing to the table? Forget this. Rasa's hosting this meeting, right? So Rasa's taking us even another level higher up on the stack. So when you come to the table and say, hey, I'm an expert in building chatbots, if all you bring to the table is Rasa, it's a very good baseline, but you need to bring in a bit more. And what you need to bring in is labeled data, right? Because winners label data. And, come on, you're killing my joke. Winners label data. And people who don't label data go to the job center. Thank you. All right, so that's kind of what deep learning means for data scientists, right? It's changed the way that we work. It's changed, like, the algorithms aren't the important part. It's really about how we manage the data and collect it so that we can efficiently train those algorithms. That's the place where we can bring the most significant added value to a project. But you also need to ask yourself, what does it mean for the business, the people who pay us to be data scientists? Read this comic for a moment. This is Dilbert, one of my favorites. All right, who has an MBA here? Raise your hand, don't be ashamed. No MBAs? Excellent, good crowd. All right, so this happens loads. I identify with this very deeply, like as a practitioner. But you go to the manager and he's like, "Yeah, this is this mission," and tell him that data's wrong, and we'll use the other data. You know, well, that's also garbage. And then he gives you some smart-ass answer like, "Can you average them?" Dumb, right? You give him a smart-ass answer back. Well, I can multiply them too. I can stand on one leg. You know, it doesn't matter. But this is really significant because this occurs really often in business, in the workplace. And for a business, I think the first thing that means is that your data scientist is going to go and play some Johnny Paycheck and tell you to take this job and shove it, right? Because fundamentally, a data scientist who's good at his job, you spend time hiring the best talent, you wasted tons of time on HR, tons of resources, you brought the best talent in, and now they're going to get up and leave because you don't have the resources for them to do their job right, all right? That's the first risk that bad label data holds for your business. But the more important one, or in other words, your bad data costs you your best employees. It says so in the Bible. You didn't see that coming, did you? Read this. This is from the book of Exodus, right? When the Jews are escaping Egypt. So data scientists are a bit of a dramatic bunch, right? This assembly to death. But you know, it's in the Bible, what can you do, right? We get frustrated when there's no labeled data and we want to go back to academia, and that's what we do if you don't give us enough labeled data. To recover from that excellent joke. Right, so more seriously though, if you think about data science, you know, within your business, it's a factory, it's a cost center, it's producing something, right? And just like any factory, the thing that like it depends on is the raw materials that come in, right? Like, because if you have bad raw materials, then, you know, things are not really gonna work out well. So kind of at a very high level, if you're an MBA, you might be looking at your data science organization kind of like this, you know? There's this thing, there's raw data, it comes in on one side, it goes through data science, and out comes profit, right? And if you think about it a little bit harder, then I'm usually helicoptering above that and shoving money all over it and hoping for the best. But then like if you're in middle management, then you kind of like need to think more deeply, what's happening inside of that data science process, inside this NLP place. And traditionally, before deep learning, like what we had was this place with a lot of really smart people. And they were working really hard doing feature engineering and talking about hidden Markov models and support vector machines and God knows what, right? And usually to support them, we had an Oompa Loompa in the factory who was like, you know, I cleaned the data a bit, I like fix it around and whatever, right? But deep learning has kind of changed that. So today we don't really need a lot of really smart people to do all that work. But what we do need is a lot of Oompa Loompas suddenly to label our data, all right, to make sure it's clean. And because we need so many Oompa Loompas, suddenly we need a Willy Wonka to manage them, right? Because what happens is if a bunch of drunken sailors, then it doesn't really, then you know what you're going to get is garbage out of your process. And it doesn't even matter how smart the people doing the machine learning are, because if your good data is garbage, then you know your output is garbage. And that's where LightTag comes in, all right? So this is where we can help. An annotation tool. So again, the Tibetan guys got more advanced and started doing parts of speech processing. And this is what like entity labeling looks like, right? So you highlight a word, you select a tag, and you label. You can, so say if you're in the chatbot world and you want to do label a bunch of examples, like an entire conversation, item by item, you can do that. You can classify and do entities and link things together. Most importantly, so eventually you reach the point where you have a few annotators who made annotations and you also have a few models and you want to review it and figure out where there are conflicts and accept just the right choice. So you can do that quite easily with LightTag, right? This is us accepting and rejecting things with the keyboard, and here's a conflict, right, between, I don't know, a model and 3 annotators, so you choose the right object, right? And then you suddenly have a golden source and you have reports on You have reports on all of your models and all of your annotators. A big issue with once you start annotating at scale is managing a team, right? So you're not doing this as one person anymore. You have 5 people going on. You want 3 of them to hit each example, and you don't really want to start sending out Excel. LightTag, you just say annotate this data set with this collection of tags. I want 3 annotators on every example. Boom. Someone logs in, he gets a piece of work. Doesn't have to search for it, doesn't have to think about it, just gets work to do. If you want to define different teams who are working, so say you have a domain expert in finance and domain expert in legal, or someone who speaks Swahili and someone who speaks Arabic, then you can assign different teams to different tasks, turn them on and off. It's really great. And then get metrics, right? So who's agreeing with who, who's disagreeing. You can get all of this from the API, go into like deep detail. And then once you're done, you can say, hey, I beat Space Invaders and I won labeled data. And so the punchline of this talk is that winners labeled data. Be a winner and use LightTag. Thank you. Questions? Come on. Good?
You can grab down. Oh, there you go.
Please, sir.
So, quick presentation. What type of output does LightTag get? So, I guess, how do you get it back?
That's an excellent question. So it depends on what you did. So we have 3 modes of annotation, right? If you're doing entities, then you'll get kind of the text and then a list of the spans that were annotated. And then you can choose either to get all of the annotations or just the golden source. If you're doing classification, then you'll get the text and the labels. If you're doing relationships, then you get an agency matrix, right? So all of the entities and then how they were related and who said what. Please, that's what I'm here for. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. I have a son. He's really new. He's 8 months old. So when I explained to him, all right, it's kind of the same. Okay. So and like it's a lot. It's really valuable to understand what's in there because it's like everything the customer's ever said. But it's so much text, they don't want to go through it, like it's too expensive. So what they're going to do instead, they want to use machine learning, right, to like teach the model to understand the text and tell them the interesting things. Like for example, I worked at a large bank, had a lot of chats, and they wanted to find all the places where the traders were cheating because they paid $1 billion a year in fines, right? So like, I don't want to pay $1 billion. Bring that down to 200 million. So that's kind of the motivation. But then, so how do you make the machine learning model learn? Examples of like what you wanted to know. And it turns out when you need a lot of examples, then you need a lot of people working on it. And then you need to manage it, right? And so essentially what we provide is the interface to do the actual work of like examples.
Yes. Is something
Cool. Let's give a round of applause for Olaf.
Well, yes, thank you very much for inviting me, even as a replacement speaker, but I'm very happy to be here. I want to talk about our project Open Knowledge Interface. In my main job, I'm a lecturer on information management, e-business, and I also work as a project lead of the Open Knowledge Interface project. Wow. No. Yes. So OKI is a digital assistant with the aim to help students write better papers. I don't know, I think more or less everybody of you is a student or has been a student. So you know the perils of writing an academic paper, and students sometimes they really suffer if they really have to write a paper. And we think this is not a good idea because academic writing is something very constructive and very useful also for everyday life. And so we want to help students to write better papers. We have 3 different points of attack to help them write these better papers. It's mainly to give them a certain project management facility, because we found that students very often, they start to write in the very last moment. So that's called binge writing, when you start to write shortly before you have to hand in the paper, and we want to have students being more structured while writing and working on the paper. We also want to give them context-specific hints on academic writing and academic research, because we found that we have a lecture on academic practices, but it comes at the very beginning, and once they need this knowledge, it's not present anymore. So we want to give this knowledge at the point where they really need to know it. And we want to give them some research. Basically Google, but also Springer Link, EBSCOhost, something like this. And we want to combine these and have a more guided, structured literature research. Well, as a technology base for our digital assistant, we use Telegram as our main user interface infrastructure. We also use web interface for some things that cannot be handled so good in a chat, because they simply need a bigger space. We also need Node.js as our main programming language. We use MongoDB as a database, and we use Rasa as our NLU provider. So we are very thankful for Rasa. Otherwise, we would have to use Dialogflow or something like this. But I think Rasa is much better. Well, it's very strange, but I think you already had this experience with this strange thing. Our dialects are really very, very simple. So they are not really very impressive. You all know this. Well, we have commands you use in Telegram, like you have a slash and then you give a direct command. And we have natural language interaction. Thanks to Rasa, this is very easy. So that's not really impressive. We also have some more intelligent things, like we say tomorrow or something like this. Thanks to Duckling, this is not really impressive. So this is very easy. This is a very traditional passive dialogue. So if you interact with a chatbot very often, you as a user ask the chatbot something. You want something from the chatbot. And then the chatbot responds to you and tries, if it's a very good chatbot, to mock a real person. We use buttons also. Buttons also means to react to the user if he wants something. What I want to talk about today, which I think is not so heavily discussed as passive dialogues, are active dialogues. Active dialogue means you come to the user. So not the user comes to you, but you come to the user and tell the user, well, something. I try it again. The first thing you have to think about if you talk about or think about implementing active dialogues is what is the trigger event? What should trigger the active dialogue? The most simple thing is time. So that's why we have a project plan. So we give the students, together with the student, we develop a project plan to work on her paper. And the good thing about this is that we then know when a student will work on a certain task. So now we know this day he will just try to work out his project plan. This day he will scan abstract. This day he will use his literature list. This means that in the background we can check for these dates using a cron job and then come back to the user at these dates. So I think this is the most simple or simplest way to trigger an active dialogue. Another trigger for active dialogues are event-based. So for example, for us, it's very important to present the user good literature search results. So we present them abstracts, and then they say, this abstract is interesting or it's not interesting. For us, it's very important to present them interesting abstracts. Because if a user, if he suffers maybe 5 not interesting abstracts, then he will simply not use the tool anymore. So if we see that user always responds with, this is not an interesting abstract, then we can trigger a certain active dialogue and tell him, well, do you want maybe to improve your search? That's another trigger event. It's also a very simple trigger event. If the user does not do something, then you simply can say, now you're not doing something, should I help you? Should I do something for you? Do you really want to drop out of your project, or should I do something for you that you can work better? I think which is a little bit more complicated and which is a little bit more interesting for the AI guys is an assumption-based trigger event. So for example, if you combine a lot of data and then assume that a student will most likely fail his paper, or that he will maybe be very good in his paper. And using this assumption, you can trigger a certain active dialogue and tell him, hooray, now you did already what you have to do, or now you really need to work a little bit harder. I think that's the most interesting, especially out of an AI perspective. Well, and if you want to use active dialogues, is what should you do if the user is not available? So if you have a passive dialogue, it's most likely that the user who wants to talk to you is present in this moment while he interacts with your chatbot. But if you actively go to the user, then it's more likely that the user is not present at this moment, and then you have to deal with this certain circumstance. So we found some ways to deal with this. One easy way is to just inform the user. So the user, he is just informed and you simply don't care if he's not there. So if it's not so important, then you will just inform the user and the user will read the message or not read the message. Do you?
I'm a user.
Yes.
I go to the chatbot and I type a query and it does user research? But it can be determined, right? So we're just kind of assuming the user asks a question and the chatbot brought in the paper.
Yeah, it's not meant this really classical passive dialogue. But the idea is that you set up a project for your paper. So you set up a project, and normally writing a paper is not just a one-day task. It's a longer task. You're writing papers? But you have written papers. Perfect. So you know what is about writing papers. So we don't want this just one-day task. We want the students to work on it constantly. So that's why we give them a project plan. And one part of it is abstracts. To scan abstracts, you need literature, you need the abstracts. And that's what we do in the background. So one day, we come to the user and tell him, we found new literature for you. So we search for them on a daily basis. And if we find something new, then we inform the user, now you have, we found something new. And then, but we don't care if he reads. So it's not said correctly, but we don't check it if he reads. So it's not so important. We just want to inform him, and then it's okay. Well, a little bit more interactive is to invite the user to do something. So we inform the user about something, but we also invite the user to do something. But this can be done asynchronous. So we just give the message, and then the user decides to click on it, and he can do this whenever he wants. So it's not really something that he has to do immediately. Another way that's even a little bit more strict is to wait. So we inform the user about something. Do you want to do something? And if the user wants to do something, then he can press a button. This means that yes, 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 and this means no. So he presses yes, and in this moment, we start the active dialogue. If he press no, then we will delay the tool. So we will just wait what the user wants. Another, even more strict way is to reschedule the task. So we inform the user, and we really need an answer. For example, we need search terms that we can search in the background for literature. So we need the user to fill in the search terms. That's why we inform him about, now do you want to give us your search terms? And if he is not present or does not want now, then we will simply tell him, okay, we come back later. So you need a notion of time that you come back later to this active dialogue. Well, active dialogue, sense. Yeah, what is the sense of using active dialogue? So if you talk about chatbots, you very often have the idea of a chatbot being passive and mocking a real person. But having active dialogues, I think it becomes more and more important, not only in education, but also in other settings. You have a very strong user proximity. So if you don't wait for the user to come to you, but you come to the user on a regular basis, you keep very close to the user. You can inform the user and you can help the user actively. You can also adopt your system dynamically because you know about the behavior of the user. If the user never responds to an active dialogue or an invitation in the morning, it should be a good idea to always send or some other time. And you all know about attention economy. As a lecturer, I can say, as a lecturer, with my lectures and with my knowledge, I compete within the lecture. I compete with Facebook, Instagram, a lot of other things. So within the attention economy, attention is the most scarce resource. And so you really need to go to the user and actively grab what you can get from his attention. I think in a global perspective, this adds to the problem, but in a local perspective, you grab the attention that you need for the things you want to say. Well, thank you very much. If you want to try out OKI, I would be very happy. So you need to install the Telegram messenger and search for Open Knowledge Bot, which is our bot. And we produced a very short script to write a paper. So normally we have bigger scripts for bachelor thesis or master thesis or something like this. But this will lead you through the OKI possibilities within 5 days. Thank you very much for your attention and for hearing me. And if you have any questions, critics, or discussion point, I'm very happy to answer. Yes. On a trial base. So it's still alpha. It's still alpha, and we don't want to force students to use it. But there are some students who used it, and we have to improve a lot, I have to say. So we are still alpha, and we have to improve a lot, but it's all manageable. So it's on an alpha base. I hope we will finish in September 2019. But then we want students to use it on a regular basis. Sorry? To be honest, the feedback on this project management part is very good. The feedback on the actual literature search is not so good. So, but this is something we need simply to improve. I think this is technical issues we have if we use for literature, because we check for all these EBSCO, Springer, DOIJ, and we combine them all together, and we need to be more, yes, we need to do something there to have it better. Unfortunately not. Unfortunately, we need to rely on the data labeled by EBSCO, and they label it differently. For example, DOAJ, they have a very fine data labeling, and it's perfect. So it's very good for us. So I could perfectly agree, label data. It would also be good for other person than using your data. Yes, exactly. We rely on metadata quality, and if it's bad quality, then it's harder to get good. I think it's not possible, it's not impossible, but it's much harder to get good results. You need a lot of workarounds then. Yes.
Learn the fundamentals of doing the university paper there.
Sometimes, that's true, yes. So I teach this course, Fundamentals of Academic Research, in the first grade for university. And sometimes they know a lot out of their school. But sometimes they also, I have to say, they did not learn it very properly. So I think it would be a good idea to come back, but it would be a very good idea to bring it also to the gymnasium or other kinds of school. Absolutely, yes, I agree. But that's in the pipeline somewhere far ahead.
There's actually a question from because we're live streaming, so the online community has asked, why do you use only Rasa NLU and why have you like Rasa?
I have to admit that I did not really understand Rasa core by now. That's maybe because I did not really think about it. So our dialogues, they are really very simple and they are very atomistic. So we do not really need to align the dialogues themselves very much. And I think that's, in my understanding, so really, I did not really think about it too much. This is what Rasa core is doing. But I would be very happy to apply every technology that is for free. Yes.
Any other questions? All right, so you can grab all of them. Okay. So that's the part which we're experimenting right now with, and it's with you guys coming on stage and talking about what you have been working on. Is there somebody here? No? Oh, cool. Nice. Cool. Give a round of applause. That's like very brave. Cool. There you go. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Olga. I'm the co-founder of Dialogueshift. So Dialogueshift is a Berlin-based startup, and we have a chatbot development framework. So we use different NLUs. We are We are an API-based framework, so you can access different APIs. It's like Lego, and you can build your own solution. But I don't want to talk about this one. I want to talk about one solution we have built for the hospitality industry. It's a chatbot solution, a messaging solution, connecting hotels and their guests along the whole guest journey. So it starts on the website when the user comes to the website and is interested in the hotel and wants to book a room. And there is a chatbot. And it's a hybrid chatbot, so there's always also the possibility to have to chat with the front desk of the hotel. So then the chatbot can answer questions and can help with the booking. It's deeply integrated into the booking engine, which is pretty cool, because the hotel can see if there's any problem with the booking. They can assist them with that. And this way they can increase the conversion rates on their website, which is very important for hotels. And then when the guest comes to the hotel, we have also smartphone chat. It's a progressive web app, so without downloads, anything. We also have integrations into other messaging platforms like Telegram, Facebook. And when the hotel guests are in the hotel, they can chat with the front desk, with the hotel staff, asking questions for recommendations, also making reservations, for example, in the restaurant, or they can book services like spa treatments or babysitter service or stuff like that. And also the hotel can ask the guests for feedback, which is very important for hotels because they always want to know if the guests are satisfied or not because they're afraid of bad reviews. So the guests can also give feedback, and everything is in a chat. So we automate about 80% of the requests coming from the guests, which is very good for the hotels because they have really trouble finding employees, or the costs are very high. And with the other 20%, because there's always someone at the other end who can, in the end, answer the question or help the user or the guest. So everyone is very happy. And yeah, so this is our hospitality solution.
Sorry, what's your name once again? Maybe you can grab Olga after that and ask her more about the project. Is there somebody else? Cool. Yes.
Hi. Hi, I'm Kit. I'm an R&D engineer at JobPal, which is a Berlin-based startup where we build recruitment chatbots. So we work with clients, like large enterprise clients, to build chatbots for recruitment. We partner with large companies to basically build something that's like on different platforms, on Messenger, WeChat, or Smooch. Smooch is the main one. And this appears on their recruitment page. The end user is often a job seeker who comes in and might say, have some search, like, oh, I'm looking for this kind of job in this kind of location, and the chatbot is able to actively provide search results. But one of the things that we do is automate part of the answering of frequently asked questions that come into the recruitment teams. So especially for very large companies with thousands of employees, there's a lot of job seekers and people interested in jobs who ask questions. So part of what we do is provide a text classification machine learning based service where that sort of helps recruiters automate some of that work. So when job seekers ask questions like, what's the salary range? What are the benefits? What's the vacation like? What's the difference between full-time, part-time, flexi, Ausbildung, traineeship, and all these different kinds of different enterprise? The recruiters are able to use a dashboard that we develop to kind of manage this data set. So what I do is I work a lot on thinking about data quality. So I work on machine learning and natural language processing services at JobPal, but specifically I focus on how do we diagnose and resolve data quality issues. So how do I support the project managers and ultimately the clients throughout the timeline of all the projects in getting their data quality really good before we launch, but also maintaining it over time as more questions come in. So often the interesting thing that happens is that there's some new concept that comes in that wasn't anticipated. And so this whole process needs to be robust to that. So I think that's really interesting. If you're interested in talking more about data quality or about recruitment chatbots, please come talk to me. So yeah, I'm excited to meet you all. It's my first time here. Thanks.
Sorry, and your name is?
I'm Kit.
Okay, cool. Cool. Is there